So Erica, thank you so much for joining the patient story to share your story with countless people who need to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for hosting this platform. I think it's really important for people to hear and share their stories. It's very therapeutic.
Yeah, I think it's helpful for both, right? For people who are telling it, for people who are hearing it. That's the hope. So let's dive right in. I know
Yes.
this is pretty fresh for you. I mean, it's all within the last year. So
Yes.
describe to us what happened that let you know something was wrong. What were those first symptoms?
So initially, physically, I noticed a change in my neck, and my mom had thyroid cancer 2 years ago. So she was able to have surgery. She quickly recovered within a couple months. And so when I found a lump right here on my neck, I didn't worry too quickly. I just knew that I should schedule an appointment, which I did. And then I talked to the doctor, my primary doctor, who it right away showed some concern and started to schedule me a series of tests. So initially it was a lump, a physical lump, but I will say that after that physical appointment with my doctor, I did start to have more symptoms, some of them a lot more challenging, but itchiness is one. Um, and it was in a sensitive area where the itchiness just got worse and worse. And I started to have night sweats, severe night sweats, where I lost a lot of sleep and I lost a lot of weight because I wasn't able to eat full meals. So I think in July, when that physical lump hadn't worried me, I mean, like a week after that physical and the few weeks after, I started to experience some of the more severe pain and symptoms.
Gotcha. Okay. So, how long was it between that first visit to your, I guess, was it primary care doctor,
Mhm.
to the next step for you? How long, what happened? Yeah.
Yeah. So the first appointment happened at the end of July of 2019. And then because she was concerned that it might be uh, something more serious, she scheduled the biopsy test for me, first actually an ultrasound a week after, so maybe 5 days after. And then she scheduled the biopsy 2 weeks or 3 weeks later. And I would say all the series of tests took about a little over a month. And no one was able to tell me anything. There was, I think, the stress of that unknown was really starting to preoccupy me and also make me much more aware of the symptoms, because I think I tolerate pain or yes, physical symptoms pretty well, but I think the anxiety caused me to get more nervous and feel everything much more intensely as I went through the series of tests, waiting for an answer. And I met a lot of other doctors through that experience. I went to go to CT scan, I had to go to PET scan, I had to a ear, neck, and throat doctor who was just like, I feel like a quick moment in time. She was really caring as she bled me through the biopsy test. I had a needle biopsy and then a surgical biopsy, and she walked me through, but she was just such a quick moment that I don't even remember her name. And I remember she's the one who made the call to me to let me know the results of that surgical biopsy. And
Gotcha.
she said, over the phone, I pretty sure were, I think, her words. And she's like, I'm pretty sure it's cancer, but I'm not an oncologist, is how she ended the conversation.
Ah,
And I'm like, what? This is what will make it more conclusive, I asked her, because I really at this point just want to know. I had planned a vacation with my husband, which I was pushing for more answers so that we can decide whether or not we were going to go on that trip. And when she said, I'm pretty sure, but it's not conclusive, that's when I pushed my primary doctor to sort of coordinate all the pieces together for me. Because, in late July, when I had met with my primary care doctor, it was sort of like the medical system had pushed me to do these series of tests with all these other people. And now I was hearing from the ear, throat, and neck doctor, you know, I'm pretty sure, but so I went back to my primary care doctor and I said, I really need to know an answer. I really need, if this is something that does look like cancer, I need to know. So that's when they finally scheduled me with an oncologist at the medical facility. And that's when I finally heard about a month and some weeks later, yes, 100%. This is what they had now diagnosed, Hodgkin's lymphoma. And they concluded that it was, you know, stage 3B, which I've learned stages don't really matter with Hodgkin's lymphoma. So it was a relief to finally receive the diagnosis when for the past month I had only heard, I'm pretty sure, or I think it is, or maybe when you hear that, yes, it is, you know, 100% sure, and this is the treatment that is given. It was that weight had lifted from me.
On your shoulders. I mean, because for some people, I've heard this many times, it's the waiting part that is so hard. You don't have a plan of action. Um, and it sounds like, so for you, it was like 6 weeks or so, I mean, of just waiting after that first appointment. Let's walk through these different steps. First, before we go there, how were you able to get through these waiting periods? Like, did you find anything that helped move you through mentally? That might help.
Yes. So I now call myself, I'm going to be a lifetime runner. So, and any challenge that I've ever experienced in life, I would run. You know, around my neighborhood. I would take different trips around the Bay Area to different hiking trails to go on a run with my brother. And I am still amazed at what the mentality of how you handle certain anxiety can get you through. And I was having really severe symptoms at that point. I was like, not, you know, having night sweats, maybe getting 3 to 4 hours of interrupted sleep. And yet I was still running because I know I needed that for my mental state. And it wasn't fast running. I definitely noticed that I was slowing down, but I would push myself to go outside and just think of what my body's capable of, even despite the stresses of what was happening. And looking back on it now, there's a race that I did with a runners club that I'm part of here in San Francisco called the Dolphin South End Runners Club. And it was a 3-mile run. And at the time I'm like, oh yeah, definitely I could do 3 miles, but it was a lot of hills, which I wasn't expecting. And I still did it. And the race, they took pictures of you. And there's a picture of me at the finish line of that race. And as I look at that picture, I think, like, whoa, I was going through all of these unknowns and my body was like inflamed and feeling hot and uncomfortable. And yet I'm like there finishing. Right. So it was just finding those moments to be really proud and amazed of what my body can handle, which got me through the waiting period. And even when I received the diagnosis, I'm like, this body is really strong, and whatever treatment I have to go through, I trust that it's going to be strong enough to handle it. At least that was my hope. And what gave me, it just gave me hope to know that whatever came along. I also was amazed with the community that I had surrounded myself with. I am spiritual, I'm religious, and I found myself going back to praying devoutly and with my father, who I hadn't prayed with in a really long time. And he lives close by, fortunately for me. So I stopped by my parents and I said, you know, I'm going through this and I just need us to pray. So praying with my parents and my husband really helped me just mentally know, like, I have this community of people who are going to care for me as well. And I have myself. if as strange as that sounds, it's like I have my community that's going to support me and I have myself. So those two things really help me like get through this really stressful waiting period.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love how you put that. And hopefully that'll resonate with people who are reading and listening to this right now. Let's walk through some of these. I mean, you needed that strength because you had a lot to
Yeah.
go through. And
Yeah.
so the first appointment. I mean, you had the ultrasound. I don't have the date here,
Mhm.
but that was pretty quick, right? That was an easy process.
Yeah. Easy. Yeah. And it was, I actually, go ahead.
Yeah, just can you describe what happened at the appointment and how long it took to get results, what those results were?
Yeah, I didn't recall the ultrasound because it was just a moment in time, and it was me taking an additional step because I've always had some issues with hormones and that. So I requested them to take a look into it, and the ultrasound was pretty quick. At that appointment, I did go with my mom, and there was no concern from the results there. So it was, about 4 or 5 days after my primary care doctor, and it was me asking for them to check on this additional part of my body that necessarily wasn't having symptoms, but something that I wanted to check out because I was concerned.
So it was
And
an
there was
ultrasound
nothing.
of a different part of your body.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you
But
mind,
there was nothing.
do you mind revealing what that was? Ultrasound of,
It was an ultrasound of, I have always had issues with my hip area.
got it.
Um, and so I was worried that it might be related to my uterus or my, colon area or any part of my uh, organs in that area,
Hmm.
because I know that in past history, and even when my mom was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, she asked for that because she said it's something that my family has experienced.
Right.
So
But that was
even though
not
I
related to this at the end of the day.
no,
Okay.
no, it was not. Yeah, yeah, it
Not
was not
related.
related.
So then the first real sort of step then was the needle biopsy. That was August 7th. Can you describe the process of what happened there?
Um, because I had just gone through the ultrasound and I wasn't nervous, I ended up going by myself because I said, well, um, it's just going to be a quick test. And I did it. I am very scared of needles. I never cared to have lab results done unless told by my doctor because needles scare me. And it's part of the fear that, and reason I didn't have, I never gave blood. I never was a blood donor because of the needle. So going into that appointment, I knew what was going to happen, but actually seeing how big the needle was really freaked me out. And now I was by myself because I was like, I can do it. But the doctor who I had was understanding, and she said to me that a lot of patients actually have a fear of needles. Don't remember what that phobia is called. And she walked me step by step of what was going to happen and how they were going to numb the area so I wouldn't feel it. Um, think they did the needle. There was a part that I'm recalling that they had to go up my nose too, but I don't remember the reason for that. But I do remember them putting the needle. Oh, I think it was to numb it. So they numb it. I know there was a nose section where they put something up your nose, but everything at that point is numb. And yeah, she said to me after the very, very quick process, I don't know if I was there any more than like 20 minutes, 25 minutes,
Okay.
that the results would come in right away. And they did. so, so she said that there was still concern, but she wanted to do the surgical uh,
Biopsy.
biopsy.
Because this was a fine needle aspiration, they stuck the needle into your area where the lump was. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
And it's a long, thin needle. What did it feel like? Just like a quick prick? Was it?
Yeah, it was a quick prick. It wasn't nothing. I think the numbing sensation was much harder to deal with, but it was so quick that it's just a quick moment in time. And I wanted the answers. So I know that for me, I sort of like pushed all my fears aside because I'm like, I need to get this done because I want an answer for myself. And within 25 minutes, it was done and over.
And you got results right there and then, or?
No, it was on a Friday afternoon because I was pushing to have answers right away. So I didn't, I think I got the results back like on a Monday or Tuesday of the following week. So it
Gotcha.
wasn't.
And I see that it was inconclusive. And so this doctor wanted to, was this the ENT person?
No, it was, yes, the ear, mouth, and throat. Yes.
Okay.
She was the one who gave me the results. And she
And
said it was inconclusive.
and
So.
then she wanted to do a surgical biopsy. So can you, that
Mhm.
was about 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later. So can you describe what happened with the surgical biopsy? Like you went under and what you remember coming out of it?
Yeah, so it was, I didn't, I think I walked into it not doing a lot of research. And I'm really good about doing research, but I figured, well, they'll tell me when I get there, just like they did the needles. So when I got there, I think I got nervous when I had to sign some release papers because I didn't realize that it was a surgery, since over the phone they had said, oh, you'll be out within like an hour. And um, when I signed the release papers, that's when I started asking the questions of exactly what I was going to go through, because I think being unaware of that for myself got me nervous, because I realized they're probably going to use some anesthesia or whatever, and I'm going to be out for the count. And that was not the case at all. It is surgery because I did have to have it open where I had found my lump, and they did numb it, but I wasn't under. So I was aware of what was happening, but I couldn't feel anything. And they took a piece of what was there out, and we're going to send it to the labs, which is why I had to have surgery so that they could cut open and take a piece. But I remember, because I was aware of what was being said, I remember the doctor who was doing the surgery say, oh, this feels like, and I forgot the name of the cell, but he said it feels like it. I think, it is. And when he was done, I did bring up that conversation that I had overheard with him. And he said, I can't say anything conclusive now because nothing's conclusive if it's until the lab, unless it's in the lab and we can study it. But, it just feels like what most cells under certain cancers feel like. So I think it was make me more aware that it was a high possibility, but because nobody could be 100% conclusive, I still, cited on hope that this was, this
Right.
was
Right. No,
nothing.
I hear you. And you bring up a great point, which is you had overheard this doctor. He probably didn't think you could. So he's talking out loud. We're encountering this a lot too. People might need to be aware that doctors, for their own reasons, are not going to, I mean, you want answers. You want answers all the time. You just want to know yes or no. But there is a lot of weight. There's a lot of caution, right? And you dealt with it
Mm-hmm.
too. So do you have any sort of like tips for people? Just heads up, look, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think what has helped me with working with the doctors, because it is a community of people wanting to help you. And I would have never had said that had I gone through this, but I only say that because doctors don't want to give you information that may not be necessarily true. And in the world of science, everyone needs 100%, assurance before they move forward with treatment, or before, and it interrupt your life. So what helped me was just asking a lot of questions. And it wasn't until actually that test that I started, for unhealthy reasons, Googling a lot. But I wasn't Googling like possible diagnosis. I was Googling questions I should ask my doctor. And I was also reaching out to friends who work in the health field on what questions I should be asking. Because as a patient, they don't want to alarm you, but they also want you to take caution that this is something serious and you should move forward, especially as people have so many of their own myths and ideas of what cancer and treatment are.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really great insight, actually. And so I see here that it was inconclusive again with a count. How long did you get those results from the next surgery?
So after that, they didn't, they gave me the results back that Friday when the ear, mouth, and throat doctor called me. And that's when I knew it was something serious and I would have to go through treatment. And again, was just this idea of cancer and not being familiar with any other type of cancers, only those exposed from the media and with some family who hadn't had pleasant experience. So I was just, she called me on that Friday and she said, this is, you know, serious. I can't make conclusive, I can tell you everything about what it is, but it's something that very likely is, you know, a Hodgkin's lymphoma. I think she said it, and I didn't even know what that was.
Was that
But
the first
again,
time you had heard Hodgkin lymphoma? Yeah.
yeah, that was the first time. That was the first time, but she wasn't able to. And
Definitively say anything. Yeah.
yeah, and she said, and actually what she did do is she said, well, you have to schedule an appointment with an oncologist. And I'm like, I don't have that readily available. I don't even know, you know. So that's when I think immediately after that, I sent my primary care doctor an email because I was getting frustrated with so many people not wanting to be 100% conclusive about what was happening.
Right.
Um, but knowing that there was something there and they weren't fully telling me what that was, maybe as a point of caution to protect me from, you know, going down a path by myself or whatever their means was, I just wanted to be conclusive. So I called my primary care doctor.
Right, right. I hear you. And actually, I see here that there was a CT scan even before that surgical biopsy,
Mhm,
um,
mhm,
and it was of the chest and the spleen area.
mhm.
Could you sum up that CT scan experience for people who have never undergone one?
It was my first time as well, and I had no idea. And I knew that they had to uh, put some dye, and there were so many different variations of how CT scans can be had. So um, that is something I did Google, like what is a CT scan, for better or worse. And before the appointment there, I did call and I asked, like, what kind of CT scan, you know, is this? Should I not eat anything? Because they, the person who had made the appointment didn't tell me everything I should do prior to the appointment. And they said, no, just come in. Um, at my hospital, it's in a trailer. So I've noticed that a lot after that appointment, I noticed that a lot of hospitals are putting their CT and PET scans in trailers because of the radiation and outside of the facility. So that was a different experience, um, getting walked from the waiting room into a trailer. But it was quick. You know, they put a needle in you to put the dye in, and you lay on this back of this bedding and go inside a half tube. So it's not like an MRI where you're going fully, it's a half tube. And you sit there or you lay there as still as you can um, until they have enough images for you, for themselves. I'm not nervous. I'm not a person that is claustrophobic. And because I've learned to meditate over the years, I just found myself like meditating as I went through that. And it walked me through it, like says, hold your breath. Yeah. Now release your breath, hold your breath, release your breath. And I think this may sound weird, but because I don't like needles, I actually appreciated this side of the test when I wasn't, you know, exposed to like long needles or anything. It's just a little prick on the arm to get the dye in me and uh, feel a little heat sensation and then be done with it. I didn't find it as scary as some of the others.
Yeah. Did you feel the sensation to use the bathroom, like with the contrast dye that they say?
Yeah, not the first time. I will say that my last CT scan after treatment, I did feel a lot more, but that first one, no, not
Okay.
so much.
Okay. It's always a funny sensation.
Yeah, it's like a weird sensation, but they warn you so much. At least the technician administering it, they're like, you're going to feel this sensation. Don't be alarmed. And so when I didn't, I asked if that was okay. And they're like, oh, okay, you're fine then. No worries.
And then how long did it take to get the results from the CT scan for you?
Took me, I think it took them right away, like a week. Again, I didn't even get to see the results until the oncologist appointment. It was just very surreal because I was just going through one test after the other, and I don't remember exactly when they talked to me about that, but I do remember them bringing it out for my oncologist appointment.
So you're undergoing scans and tests, and it must be frustrating because no one's in charge of putting it all together, the pieces together. So you take the CT scan and then the results just go somewhere. You don't even know where they are. And I guess that was probably similar with the PET scan. It says here, August 23rd, you had a PET scan done. Was that your first one?
That was my first one, and I pushed for that to happen more quickly. What I've learned about PET scans is that they're very hard to administer because there's so few of them in hospitals, and they don't, looking back, I would recommend, for a person advocating for themselves to push to see if a PET scan is needed and to make sure it happens, because a CT scan happened for me. And then when I was told that I should get a PET scan, I asked a lot about why the CT scan was so, why didn't I just have the PET scan right away? Because when I was trying to schedule it for myself, no one else was scheduling it for me. It seemed like it was going to be months out. They were like, oh, you can't have a PET scan until September. And I'm like, no. I think what helped me get it earlier was that I had set from the beginning that my husband and me had a vacation planned, and I needed to know whether or not to take that trip because I was starting to get worried. And when they said September, I said, that's in the middle of what I don't know about a vacation. I don't know whether or not I should go to. So I think putting that urgency in them had helped them find a hospital that did have a PET scan earlier than what they were offering me. So I actually had to drive about an hour and a half away from where I live to go to that hospital facility to get the PET scan. And this point, because it was one of the last, just I'm exhausted from all of the tests, and they've assured me that this will be the last test where they'll be able to be more conclusive about what I have. So I went in an hour and a half away with my husband, and we made a trip out of it. We went, with enough time. I met this wonderful woman in the waiting room who saw how anxious I was and just sat with me. I think that was one of the most soothing, most calming conversations I've had. And I said, well, an hour and a half drive to get this conversation is probably my destiny. But so when I went into the PET scan, I felt almost relieved that this might be the last test so that they can just conclude what was happening. And the technician was wonderful. In fact, they put in a needle for you, or they
IV?
It's like, yes, IV, or it's for sugar. They want to, I don't know what it's called. It's like a sugar substance, but they put it in, and then you have to wait an hour before you go in to get the PET scan. Because the iodine, I don't remember, but they put it in, and then you have to wait an hour. And so the technician, when he put it in, he just told me to take a nap for an hour. And I had just had the conversation. He puts it in, I wait an hour, and then I go in for the PET scan. And it only took, I think, the PET scan 20 minutes. So waiting an hour, 20 minutes for the full scan, and then 5 minutes to close out. And
the scan is similar to the CT one, if you're describing it?
It's similar but different, just because you have that hour waiting period before CT scan, you just go straight in and they put in the IV and then they scan you. The PET scan, they put it in and then you have to wait an hour for it to go through your entire body before they do the scan. So it's very similar though. You go into a half tube and then they scan images.
Gotcha. And how long did it take to get those results?
Well, because I had pushed all of these conversations, I finally had my first oncologist appointment the following Tuesday, which is when the PET scan, the CT scan, and all the other tests were finally put in front of me.
Wow. Okay. So finally the moment has come. And just for clarification, were you going through like your primary care? Like, why was it, was it different centers, like different medical centers you were going to, or?
It was one, if it's okay to share the hospital that I was at. Yeah, so I was at Kaiser, South San Francisco.
Okay.
And I only say that because South San Francisco doesn't have all of the, they don't have all the tests you need. So in trying to, and they don't have a lot of doctors to administer these tests. So it was taking them a long time to coordinate. And with so many patients, I found myself needing to prioritize myself because the doctors, it's almost like the doctor wants to help you, but there's a line that you're in. Yeah. And I was not willing to wait in line, for better or worse, because I had this trip and I needed to know whether or not to take it. So I sort of aggressively said, hey, like, I get that there's a waiting period, but I need to have some of these tests done faster, or I needed the results faster.
And it's a message of self-advocacy that we hear time and time again, right? It's okay to push yourself because you're the only one looking out for you, right? And so, okay, finally we get to this oncology appointment. Is this an oncologist with Kaiser as well? Or?
Yeah, he's at Kaiser, South San Francisco, correct.
Okay. So you get there. Describe what happens at this appointment.
So I'm with my husband. I did know that at this point I wanted to be with someone. I had felt pretty sure that I had Hodgkin's lymphoma because so many people had said it was likely. And I think my husband did not have that full understanding yet. And I bring him up because my doctor came in the room, he walked me in, and he said, you have pretty matter of fact. He's like, you have Hodgkin's lymphoma, stages don't matter, but we name it because of where it's located in the body. And he said, and for you, it's in the spleen, so it's stage 3B because based on your symptoms and where it's located, that's how we can understand what treatment to give. And my husband went pale, he was like so pale compared to the wall. And the doctor didn't recognize at all. He just kept going through the motion of diagnosing me and telling me the next steps, so much where I had to ask my husband if he was okay, which he gave himself permission to leave the room real quick to catch his breath. And it was really upsetting because I wanted the doctor to acknowledge that it's not just me getting this diagnosis, it's both of us. Like, we're going to have to both go through this. I obviously have to go through the treatment. And, but I remember just losing focus a little bit for the rest of the conversation and not necessarily processing all the other details. Like, he gave me a handout. I remember that, to say, like, these are the treatments, or this is the standard treatment that you're going to have, ABVD, and this is what it is. And we concluded the appointment with him walking me through the infusion center, because it's right next door. And we walked through, and I think he introduced me to a nurse and said, okay, get started. We're going to get started, as soon as possible. And I just remember walking out with the weight again. And I was angry that I had that weight again, because I thought getting the diagnosis was great. Like, at least that had some clarity in it, because then I could move forward. But again, that weighed on me, knowing that this could possibly be the doctor I work with. and I wasn't going to have that. So it was in a great first appointment with him.
Yeah. And so obviously styles are another thing. Like your husband especially didn't expect it just to come out so matter of factly, huh?
Yeah.
And so was that what prompted you to get a second opinion, or was it also just, hey, I don't really know if this is it, like maybe this isn't it?
Yeah. So it's what prompted me to sort of look at a second opinion and talk to other people. And I do appreciate you putting this together, because I did go online to look for other support organizations with Hodgkin's lymphoma to gather all my facts for myself, rather than just one doctor telling me this is it.
What were you looking for in those support groups? What were your questions?
I was looking for people with or people who had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and trying to find out if it was the standard, because hearing that it's the only option was annoying to me, because in so many other cases you understand that there's other options for yourself. And getting this, I wanted to know, is this treatment it? I also wanted to talk about nutrition, because I had read a lot that nutrition helps with treatments, or, there's all this new approach about, holistic treatment. And I also wanted to explore that, which the first oncologist was unwilling to talk to me about. He said, this is it. Like, this is what you have to do and it'll go away. And I just refused to believe that. So I did seek a second opinion from Stanford. It was an online doctor, I later found out. I feel almost that I thought I was going to have an appointment, and being vulnerable in that moment, I saw Stanford, second online opinion, and I didn't think that I thought I was going to go meet a doctor there, and it wasn't that at all. It was me submitting my results to them for a doctor to look at the results with me, and then having one of their nurse practitioners call me to make the same conclusion. So looking back on it, it was helpful, I guess, just for me personally, but I don't think I necessarily would have needed that if I had heard it differently the first time. Or maybe I had, I don't know.
Right. No. So you wanted to investigate, because you didn't want to have just one only path. You wanted to make sure this is definitely the best way for you. So then you decided to go back to Kaiser, but it says you went with a different oncologist, right? So how did you make that happen?
So I had talked to my primary care doctor, because at the end of the day, she was my coordinator. I had seen her for years. She's the one who prompted the test. And I asked her if there was another oncologist on site, because I didn't feel comfortable. And her answer was a quick no. There's no one else. Like, this is all she knows of. I even think she ended the paragraph with good luck. But I figured Kaiser's a big operation and there's other hospitals. And because I live in San Francisco, I actually was encouraged by a friend to look at Kaiser San Francisco. And even while I was waiting for my second opinion, I had reached out to them. And I'm so glad I did, because it was such a different world there. And I was able to almost back to back get the Stanford second opinion, and at the same time get a call from Kaiser San Francisco letting me know that one of the doctors were available and was able to see more patients. So they partnered me with him, which he ended up being for the remainder of the treatment.
And you just, was it his style that you liked more?
Yeah, my first appointment with him was a little more than an hour. To be transparent, he was a fellow in the hospital. And I didn't care for me, because I figured he's working with other oncologists who had been there for over 30 years. So in fact, having a fellow partnered me with two other long-time experienced doctors, and their style. My first appointment, Dr. Neiman, who's a fellow, and Dr. Lopez, who is the overseeing doctor. They came in and they gave me a hug. They said, "We're sorry you're going through this. You must be really stressed out." And I remember just starting to just tear up a little bit, because that's all I had wanted, was the acknowledgement that this is scary, and that, they noted that. And then after, they went through the logistics, and they also, told me about all the resources that are available at Kaiser San Francisco that I didn't even think to ask, even through all my research, even in the initial appointment. They let me know that there's a social worker on site, that there's a nutritionist that is available to help me with the eating piece. They let me know that there's a chemotherapy orientation available to answer all my questions about what that'll look like and feel like. And, and at the end, they left and they said I was going to be fine. And it was just, again, that like weight off my shoulder. I'm like, yes, this is all I wanted. Just that acknowledgement, that like support. And then the other pieces of information, not just about the cancer, but about how to deal with it, which was really helpful.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're bringing this up, and in fact wanted to sort of group these questions together. You talk about how you had gone online to research questions you should ask your doctor. And then here, these Kaiser doctors are telling you some of the other resources. So what advice do you have for people right now on what are those top questions you should ask, whether it's about resources or anything else?
I think that the important questions are letting them know everything you're going through, not just related to the physical, which is sometimes where we go to. I know for myself, when I would go to doctor, I would only talk about the physical, but also the emotional pieces and the other pieces you're concerned about. Friends and family have always, told me I'm a workaholic. So this interruption was obviously going to interrupt that. And I told the doctors at that appointment, what about work? How am I going to deal with that? And that's when they brought up the social worker. They said that they're going to be available to you to help you through that. And they're the expert in it. I'm the doctor and I'm the expert in A, B, and C, which is really helpful, because in organizing all of the things that you're going through, it was easier for me to hear people say what they're the expert in. So the doctor, I'm an expert in the treatment, and this is how I'm going to work with you through, the next few months. I was able to put that like almost in a notebook, like say, okay, this is what I go to Dr. Neiman for, and this is who I go to my social worker for, and this is who I go to for like what I eat. And I used all of those resources. And when I didn't find them, I would ask. And the social worker became a huge part of my journey, because she was so knowledgeable in everything else. And that's someone who introduced me to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, which I had seen and signed up for already, just because they sent me a bag with a bunch of information. And she is the additional push I had to attend some of their support groups.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks for sharing that. You can always add more to this section if you think of anything else. I'd love to dive now into the chemotherapy. I see that you got your first treatment of ABVD not too long after, about a week and a half or so. First, can you describe the chemo regimen of ABVD, like how long it was, how many infusions, over how many weeks?
So I had ABVD administered to me every other week. So each doctors, the math is a little challenging, and I still don't have it 100% right, but they consider 2 treatments, 1 cycle. So I knew that I needed 6 cycles, and I would have that spread over about 6 months, so every other week. And after 2 cycles, they would do a check for me. No, I'm sorry. After 4 cycles, they would do a check for me. 2, 4, 6. Oh no, it's all getting blurred together. But so ABVD, that first appointment, I was going to receive it every other week. And I didn't know what to expect, but it turned out to be only about a 2 to 3 hour appointment for myself. I didn't choose to get a port, which is where they put in, kind of like a vision to make it easier for doctors to find an IV. Because if you don't have a port, or if you don't have the second option, yeah, sorry, what was that called again?
PICC line.
Yes, PICC line. Yes, they would have to seek the IV from your veins on your arms, and that was a question I immediately asked Dr. Neiman, like, should I look into that option? And he went and he did his research for me, and he said that it was recommended that I don't, because they were feeling confident. And if I would end up needing more treatment beyond what was originally recommended, then we could talk about it. But because he said no, I chose just to go through the pain of having them find the IV each time, which is funny because I think out of every appointment, getting the chemo was pretty easy, but it was finding the IV that always caused a lot of pain. It would cause the most stress for any of those appointments. But getting the chemo itself, no, because they had already found the IV. The nurses would administer each of the medicines. They do double, triple checks before they, put any medicine in you. But definitely finding the IV sometimes would take like up to half an hour. And I would have to like I would put a heating pad on my arm and like drink lots of water as recommended by the nurses, and do a little bit of arm weights throughout the week to make it easier for them. But they said that I would often joke like, oh, it's bad IVs, and they're like, oh no, like having a hard time to find IVs means that your body just doesn't like what it's receiving, so don't take it as they're like, but it's all good, it'll all be healed. And sure enough, I trusted them, so I would do everything in my power to make the IV find them easier to find the IV. So that was the hardest part, getting the chemo. I mean,
yeah, it was once the IV was in, but so because your veins are obviously, it's hard to get a new one, right? So with the IV, how long did it take the infusions? Was it once? I mean, it was.
Yeah, it was every other week. It would take maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours,
Okay.
because it was. So for the first four cycles, I think 2 to 4 cycles, I'm not clear. They were going to administer ABVD, and then they did a second series of tests to see if it was working, and they had let me know that it was successful. So they actually removed the bleomycin, so the B. They removed it from my regimen. So actually the appointments lessened to no more than like 2 hours. Maybe some of the wait made it a little longer, but 2 hours, because then I would only need 3 of the chemicals.
Gotcha. And so just to be clear again, it's 6 cycles, which is 6 months, and it's twice a month. So you had 12 infusions, and each infusion was just like when it was ABV, it would be 4 hours on a Monday or something or whatever, and then
whatever it is,
to the next one. Gotcha.
Yes.
Can you talk about side effects? Like, when did the side effects start to hit? What were they?
When did the side effects start to hit? For my first few cycles, it was right away. It was right away because I was, sorry about that. Because I would feel extremely tired. So because of the steroids that they give you before you take the chemotherapy, or the chemicals, I mean, they are chemicals, they gave me steroids to lessen the side effects. So to avoid nausea, to avoid, some of the really strong reactions that we so often see in movies. And after appointments, those steroids would kick in, I would tell my husband, because I would have like this burst of energy. So when I say the side effects that hit, it was actually just like this burst of energy that prevented me from falling asleep. Because if I had my appointment later in the day, I think I wouldn't get much sleep just because of the wiring. And then after the second or third day, that's when I would feel a little bit of like minor side effects of, constipation, which is always the worst one, or, acid reflux. So I would try to avoid those foods that would just increase those sensations. But those are the ones that come to mind right away.
And what helped you with the constipation and the acid reflux?
So the constipation, I did reach out to my nutritionist, who gave me some snack ideas, and I actually still eat a lot of those snacks now because they're delicious. So I've introduced flaxseed in shakes, started drinking a lot more vegetable shakes or, fruit shakes. I also made sure to drink a gallon of water. As disgusting as the taste of water started to become because of the saline, I still pushed myself to drink water or sparkling water, because that would honestly flush everything out. And that was some of the more important things I knew that I had to concentrate on to get my body ready for each treatment, was just to make sure are all the waste out of my body from the constipation, and am I drinking enough water to make me feel strong and my veins available.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. And speaking of side effects, I know hair loss is huge for a lot of people, and it says you didn't completely lose your hair. And I will quote your caring bridge in your story since you go so in depth. But is there anything else you want to kind of let people know what you wish you had known before?
So when I attended the chemotherapy orientation that Kaiser San Francisco offered me, I remember the woman, the nurse, speaking directly to this, and she said, "You may not all lose your hair, and you're already going through something traumatic, so don't feel like you have to shave your head," which is a very traumatic experience for a lot of women. And my hair has always been something I knew I could easily lose, which a lot of people said, "Oh, that'll grow back," but it was more than that to me. So I didn't feel ready after hearing her say that to cut my hair. And I told myself, when I feel ready, and if I feel ready, I'll shave my head. And it never presented itself, but I was losing a lot of hair, and I was okay with that. And you know, a week after my appointment, like a clump of hair would fall out. But for me, from my experience, it was never traumatic enough to want to shave it. Looking back, a piece of advice: as it grows back, I'm wearing this only because it's just out of control the way it's growing back. And with the pandemic, I can't go to a hairdresser. So in some ways, I do wish that I would have cut my hair or shaved it so that it could grow out more evenly. But it is what it is, and I chose not to do anything with it.
So then if you had to give a percentage, like how much hair do you think you lost?
I had really thick hair. I would say I lost 80% of it.
Okay, 80%. But for you, having just some hair, it was better than shaving it off.
Yeah, I felt like it was therapeutic for me to be going through that experience. It was weird, but I didn't have an issue with it coming down.
Yeah, it works. It's individual, the response.
Yeah,
right?
it's very individual. It's very individual.
And then I guess the last part of this interview, as I mentioned, it's more about the mental and emotional impacts. And you mentioned work, that you're a workaholic. I know you stopped work, you're cleared for end of June, but how was it both dealing with not being able to work when it's such a big part of your identity, and also maybe you can talk about the financial aspect too of cancer and cancer treatment.
Yeah, so I'm fortunate where my husband didn't need me to work, and I'm fortunate also in looking at short-term disability options. And for whatever reason, I had started to invest in my short-term disability insurance a year before. So dealing with HR was a headache. And I found someone on the other side of the customer service that when she heard me be open and honest about what I was going through, acknowledged that and gave me a lot of resources and information on how to move forward with not working, financially. So yeah, she gave me some tips that were really helpful even now.
What were
As
those
since
tips?
The tip was I thought that I needed every dollar, right? Because I was worried. I was told by my doctor, "You're not going to work. I don't think it's recommended." And they ask you, are you able to afford the cost of not working? Because they want you to be okay. And I said, "Well, I'm married," and they're like, "Good." And my work even acknowledged it. They said, "Oh, good, because we can only cover your health insurance for so long," which is sad and frustrating in itself. But for myself, I was okay. And the HR woman who I caught, she said, "I'm sorry you're experiencing that." She told me, she said, "But I would recommend that you don't pull out of your short-term disability insurance until the very end, after you've exhausted your California disability." And that's because they don't question how you're going to use your insurance, these private institutions. She said, they just want you to know it's okay. And she said, and since you do want this vacation with your husband after all of this experience, she said, it would be nice for you to be able to take vacation and, have some means to do it. And your work's not going to give you vacation. I remember her saying, your work's not going to give you vacation for having gone through this. She said, so that this is your vacation. This insurance money is what you'll be able to afford rent and other pieces that your work won't do for you. And I just remember hearing that. I'm like, oh, that's right. Like, I might have to use vacation from all of this in order to cover myself, through appointments. Or I'm not going to have any sick time after all of this. So she was thinking well in advance for me that I just almost sometimes wish I had her name and email to send her a thank you after.
Which agency was she with again? This was.
She was with. So I worked past tense for a small nonprofit that used TriNet as a third party for all HR purposes.
I see. Gotcha. Okay, so an HR sort of outsourced person. So wrapping this up, I mean, like moving through this, what was the hardest part of getting through cancer treatment? Did you feel like you had the right support around you?
There's so many pieces. It's actually moved me to think more deeply about systems in place for everyone. I was really lucky, like I said, to have a husband who was able to find, to help me with health insurance, and those pieces, they matter. They matter to bring a sense of security. But I will say that there's a lot of resources that I've also found in dealing with this that are available to everyone. And resources like the Women's Cancer Resource Center, that is an agency to help when things start to fall apart. Not everyone's going to have every answer for you, and it's important, at least it was for me, to just be open about talking about it, because I know that a lot of people I met didn't want to talk about it, and when they didn't, it left me feeling isolated. And so as a result, I just want people to know, people like me want to help, and don't. And it is a traumatizing sometimes experience to think back and live through, but I also found a lot of people that were willing to help, and the community I surrounded myself with, who I trusted, was also willing to help me find those things when when it was hard.
And in talking about getting that support, sometimes I find, you know, patients don't want to be a burden, or they, you know, how do you ask for help and make sure that you are surrounded by the right people?
Yeah, so I got a lot of prayers, and I'm only starting with that because I felt like that wasn't helpful at times. And I remember saying that out loud in a support group that I was participating in with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society here in San Francisco. And I said, I don't need prayers. You know, at that point, I think I needed support in figuring out like how to deal with the work situation. And I remember a woman stopping me, you know, in my conversation or after the conversation saying, you know, take the prayers and take any graces from anyone that's willing to support you, because you never know when you're going to need it. And I just, you know, I asked her because she was a survivor, and I said, so how, like, do I ask? And she said, people want to help, but they don't know how. So just be specific in how you ask if you can, and ask your husband to help you through that, or ask whoever is in your very close circle to help you through that. So I made my mom and my husband, I call them captains of my support group. So when I wasn't able to ask for it, I would talk with either one of them through what I was trying to figure out to ask. And they helped me figure out how to do that. And sometimes just did the ask for me, or like push people away if I didn't want to be around anyone. That, yeah, having a captain or captains of that support group is just helpful because they can become your go-to.
Yeah. And you can
And it's really
delegate
important.
things that
You
are,
can delegate.
yeah.
Yes. It's all about delegating. It's hard to. Initially, it's hard to because, you know, everyone wants to be able to do for themselves, but you start to realize like it's hard to do things for myself, and I do need support. So having that person you can delegate support from.
My last question to you, Erica, is really an open-ended one for whatever you think you'd like to, you know, pass on as a message to people. So whatever you think is the most important.
I know for me, and I purposefully wore this shirt and this pin. This is sort of how I wanted to end, sharing that I knew that I was really upset initially with how my case was being handled, or how I felt it was being handled, and how I had to coordinate everything. And for me, getting angry was making me physically hurt more and the symptoms, you know, feel harder. So I remember that I started to change my mindset, and even if I didn't feel it, that I would pretend to understand like what caring and kindness and empathy were. And I started wearing things that said it to remind me. So this is a shirt that I wore to some of my first chemotherapy appointments. You know, it says shine bright, love, peace. And I also wore this pin we had from the movie Coco, just so that I knew that, you know, that there are good people out there, there are graces, and that will help me get through it, even when sometimes I wasn't believing it. And what ended up happening was a lot of the nurses would ask me like, hey, you know, I love your shirt, or I love your message. And they would be that person for me on that day. Or someone else, if I was going on an errand, would be that person to like stop and say, I really like your smile, because I found myself smiling more. But,
yeah, because you're putting out this positive energy coming back to you.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Is there anything else you'd like to share? I mean, I know this is, you know, so fresh for you still, so you're still processing a lot, I'm sure, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think I was, I never cried before. Sorry, 1 second. My husband
No worries.
just walked me. Let me see if I can get his attention. Hello? So he's on the phone. Okay, here we go. So I was going to say that, what was I going to say? Sorry, I've
That's okay.
just lost my train of thought. Oh, I that's what I was going to say in terms of, I never cried before, and now I say I cry all the time, because it's important to allow yourself to feel whatever emotion you feel. I came out of, I received the news of remission on March 2nd, which is the time the pandemic hit. And so at the moment I thought I was going to go out to what quote unquote seemed normal again, I was asked to stay inside. And shelter in place has been my existence since September. When you go through chemotherapy, you're also asked to, be careful about where you go and how you process, not process, how you take errands. And I have cried a lot, and I'm accepting of those tears. And I realize that when I cry, it's the realization that I have to just stop, acknowledge that. And sometimes no one around me understands, or they'll question, make sure it's okay, but I know I'm okay. I write, and because of the other support groups and other people I have found, I now have like a larger community that I can go to. The Hodgkin's lymphoma was so unknown to me. And I'll end on this part. Hodgkin's lymphoma, I knew nothing about. And I will say Google did nothing for me, only to just throw a lot of information at me. But it was only until I started to talk to people or write down questions and ask my doctor that I really started understanding that it's very treatable. And it's still a cancer, but it's very treatable. And there's a lot of advanced treatment, and there's a lot of hope in this field. And I'm hopeful that in the next 5 years, the treatment's going to look totally different than what I went through. So we have to continue, supporting these places that have been able to advance this.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And Erica, thank you so much for spending so much time sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for doing this again. I really appreciate it. And hopefully my story is helpful to others.
Yeah, I have no doubt it will be.